Come on, where's the sound? Where's the song? Man, what's going on here? Sorry, folks. I normally play a song, and it's not playing. Come on. Wacky morning DJ. I'm screwing it up. Hold on. Let me start over.
Welcome
to the joy of coding.
Hello, and welcome to episode 157 of The Joy of Coding. My name's Mike Conley. Hello, how's it going? Sorry I'm a little bit late. As you can tell, I'm, as usual, just scrambling a little bit to get the stream up and running. Sorry about that, but hey, here we are. That's how the cookie crumbles. Let's get down to business. Boop. Here's my screen. Let me pump up the font a little bit. All right, so as usual, no plan survives breakfast. Things might go horribly wrong during the stream. I might get stuck. My machine might start malfunctioning. I might get things wrong. Who knows? That's how this whole thing works. None of it's pre-planned. I'm doing my normal job, and sometimes things go wrong when I'm doing my normal job. So I'm not trying to hide any of that. I'm trying to show you what it's like whenever I'm doing my job IRL. The other thing I should point out is that the agenda that we're looking at, for what it's worth, is available to you. It's a thing that you can click on and like fill in, fill in some, or not fill in. You can click on links and stuff. So if you're watching this on Air Mozilla, well, it's in the handout section to, I believe, in this direction. And if you're watching this on YouTube, it's in the video description down below. And if you're watching this on Twitch, well, I'm about to share out the agenda. Boop, 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 in the Twitch chat. There it is. And I'm also going to share out the link to rate the episode. There's this highlighted region in the agenda for after you are done the episode. Let me know what you thought. You can click on that link, fill in a form, and let me know what you thought. I read all the feedback that comes in. I use it to help shape the stream. Okay, so what else is going on? It is also useful for me to point out that there's an episode guide. So the episode guide is completely viewer driven. Viewers just like you help contribute parts to the episode guide. We're now up to episode 156, so we're all caught up. And oftentimes it's a link to like the agenda and the episode itself, and maybe some of the bugs I covered and maybe some of the tools I talked about. You should check it out. And if you've got your own notes, if you've got your own things you want to add to the episode guide, you should feel free. There is a link in the agenda here to a document on first of all, the repo where the episode guide is, along with how you can send a pull request to me. And if you want more of an episode guide specific guide, here's a contributing guide that lovely Smurf D contributed a couple of months back. So Smurf D gives you some step-by-step instructions on how you can submit things to the episode guide. Smurf D is a prolific contributor to the episode guide, and we should all be thankful. So thank you, Smurf D. And if you need yet another guide to creating pull requests, there's another link here in the agenda. So what are we doing today? Let's get down to business. First of all, let me just make sure everything's working properly. The sounds weren't working from my tablet, but I'm going to try it again. Yay, now they're working. They're a bit loud, though. I don't know if that's just me or they're kind of loud. So let me turn that down just a little bit.
It's me, Mario.
Coming in pretty hot, but hopefully
It's me, Mario.
hopefully it's not too bad. Yeah, I am recording and you can see me and I'm not dropping frames, so let's get down to business. So two things I want to do. First is I want to give you some updates on some of the stuff we worked on last week. So the first one was making the session restore Talos test work properly. That ended up getting fixed. If you're curious about what I ended up doing, you should check out the stack of patches that we wrote. I'm not entirely certain how much of it was part of the stream, but this is what ended up landing. I think we ended up using this technique, making Talos parent profiler a singleton. I think we ended up doing that in the stream. and then making sure that we initialize Talos parent profiler, and then we remove some dead code. It was this last stuff, I think, that you didn't get to see right here. For example, the ensuring the Talos parent profiler is around for running the damn tests. So like one of the annoying things about converting all of these Talos tests to web extensions is that we cannot deterministically really, well, I shouldn't say deterministically. We don't synchronously load all of the add-ons. So when one runs, if they depend on one another, you need to wait until both are ready before you can actually run them or run the test. And so we have to add some modifications so that the web extensions kind of poll, waiting for all of the dependencies to show up before we run the test, which is a little annoying, but it works. And that landed 5 days ago. What was this? Based on comment 7. This is unrelated, I guess. So what I wanted to point out now was this other bug that we looked at last week. The title bar was no longer hidden. This was a weird thing. I tried spinning up a Fedora. I installed Fedora last week on a virtual machine. Apparently this ended up not being reproducible for the reporter after a restart, so we just resolved it works for me. So that was a little bit of a waste of time, unfortunately, but I'm glad that things worked out for the user. So what are we going to do today? What are we going to work on today? Well, I've got lots on our plate that we can look at. What should we do? Let's look at this one today. I'll put this on the agenda. And a link to the bug. So what is the bug? I can talk about that while I'm setting up the links. So the bug is that with that separate activity stream content process that we're spinning up now, we have the situation where if you attempt to use responsive design mode from a local file, so if you've got a local HTML file or something, and you use responsive design mode on it, we just end up loading a blank document in responsive design mode, and that's not great. So let me show you how the bug behaves. Let's see if I can just here is a local file. I'm loading it from file : / This is a local HTML file, and then I'm going to open up DevTools here at the bottom, and this button over here opens up responsive design mode. So I'm going to click on that, and notice how the page isn't actually being loaded in here. It's empty, it's blank. That's not how it's supposed to work. This is how it's supposed to work. Whoops, sorry for that sound. This is how it's supposed to work. Whenever you load in responsive design mode, you're supposed to be able to see the same page, but it's all in a smaller window. So what's going on? I'm hoping we can find that out today in today's episode of The Joy of Coding. Now, if that doesn't work out, I want to have a fallback bug, and this one seems like a good one. So I'm going to put that in here as well. And this is a test failure that's occurring when we simulate pushing Mozilla Central up to the beta branch. So uplift simulations are failing. Ooh, also, let me turn off Wi-Fi. I'm on the wired network, so I shouldn't need to use the Wi-Fi. Good, and I'm not dropping frames. Good. And so let's see here. I'm gonna set up that link, and then I'm gonna link up my notes, and then we can get started. Root to do. So this responsive design mode thing, I've never really used it because Firefox does not need to be a responsive application itself, but you know, I can see it being pretty useful for people, especially you know, yeah, for local development you might want to use a local file at file : / although in my experience it's more common to use a local web server to more accurately mimic what your local site's going to be like when it's deployed somewhere. But hey, I'm not here to judge. I'm here to fix bugs. So let's get started. So I showed you how we can reproduce the issue, and while we were, while this bug got filed about 8 days ago, they found that the regressor was the patch that I worked on with a separate activity stream process. Jay Ryans, who used to work at Mozilla but left to go do a PhD, I think, or a master's degree somewhere, he showed up a day or so ago, which is great. It's always great when Mozillians that are off doing other things and they show up in Bugzilla again. It's great. So Jay Ryans worked on the patch actually that caused this regression, because where is it? Yeah, this is the patch that of the stack that I landed in order to get the separate activity stream process to work. This is the one that ended up causing things to break, and Jay Ryans was actually the one who wrote it. So he has some expertise, and he knows about responsive design mode, and he chimed in and said, the existing logic for about new tab may serve as some inspiration here. I'm guessing a process flip is happening here. So one approach may be to do something similar so that the content is already in the right process when opening RDM, avoiding the flip which would break it. I haven't tested this specific case, so I am only speculating. One thing to keep in mind is that the swapping stuff will need to be reimagined for fission since it implies even more potential process flips. I've discussed the impact with Nika a bit several months ago. This is just context to keep in mind. Anything done in this area of swapping will eventually need a replacement. Anyway, I assume for this current issue, we can construct some small change similar to what's already in place for about new tab. Now that's interesting. One thing I'll note though is looking at the commit message for this patch that he wrote. He says, now that we're running about home in the privileged content process, clicking on a link in activity stream while having responsive design mode activated will close responsive design mode because a process flip will occur. This causes the following test to time out. This patch disables responsive design mode in about home and will load about blank instead when responsive design mode is enabled. And that, I think, is what we're hitting, is that our code is detecting that we're hitting some kind of process flip mode, or like there's something in it knows that if we attempt to click a link, for example, to go somewhere on the web, we're on a page that will cause a process flip, and so we load about blank, because that's what Jay Ryans' patch originally did. We might need to find something a little more comprehensive here, because we just flat out disabled responsive design mode in about new tab. That ended up being our solution. Like if I open up about new tab right now, and I open up responsive design mode, it's just blank, and that is like the I think the intent. And then you can open up individual, like you can open up the pages again. Sorry for that sound. So what's going on? Why? What do we want to do here? Well, what would be lovely is if responsive design mode could somehow survive process flips. That I think will be necessary with as we spawn up more and more content processes, and as we make it possible to transition between content processes when you move from domain to domain. I mean, that's, I think, an eventual goal of Fission, so that if you're on Facebook.com and you transition to bank.com, then you end up doing a process flip, because we don't necessarily want those two things to be running in the same content process. So that's all to say that it would be great if we had a more resilient mechanism. So I don't think this is a one-stop, like little one-liner patch to fix the file URI case. I think this is, how do we make responsive design mode resilient to process flips? I think that's the bug, or I think that's the problem. So let me write that down. Let me write down my findings so far. So what's going on here is this code is running when we enter RDM. So let me link to some code. There's this function called swap. I know this because I was examining this yesterday. So we enter this code, and then we do this right here. Actually, hang on, I should copy the whole thing. What it does is it looks at the current browser and then asks E10S utils, were I to attempt to load example.com in this tab, would I need to do a process flip? And in the About New tab case, the answer is yes. And so the page that is loaded ends so we made a choice, which was to basically hobble RDM for About New tab so that we do an about blank load first in the web content process, and then users can navigate to some page from RDM and not cause process flips. It gets hairier with the file content process, because we have a special content process for file URIs as well, because we're not we're also doing a process flip here. This is going to get even hairier as Fission trucks along and as we start putting different domains in different content processes. I think RDM needs to learn to be resilient to process flips. I think ultimately RDM needs to learn to be resilient to process flips. I think that's the long-term solution here. Okay. So where are we in this code? We're in this thing called swap.js. What even is this? Because like the way responsive design mode works is pretty crazy. Because what it does is, let me open it up again. So I've entered responsive design mode right now on this page. And what responsive design mode does is it creates for us, here, let me open up the browser toolbox. Maybe we can examine this. Oh no. Applying an update in the background. This may not go well. Didn't like it. Let's try it again without the update part. Yeah, all right. So we have responsive design mode running in the parent process. So like this UI business is all running in the parent process. This browser in here is not. But the UI, if I were to select part of the UI here, is running within a type of browser. We have what's called, we're in the parent process, or remote true. We have a very, like, it's really weird, basically. What I'm trying to say is this is very weird, because what's going on is we have an in-process browser here that is loading the responsive design mode, but it's this sort of transparent intermediary, so that attempts to like touch this browser, like normally if I were to like talk to this browser tab and say give me your browser, it would give me the area for like the browser that's loading this content. But because what we have here is like this intermediary browser wrapping this tiny little browser inside, where the content was then swapped into this little mini browser, this we like proxy calls to the outer browser to the inner browser, and it's really weird. But what that means is that if I were to like load a different page here, if I go to cbc.ca, we end up telling the inner browser to load cbc.ca and not the outer one. So responsive design mode sticks around. It's very strange. And the messages are all proxied back and forth. And so that's kind of how this works. And that's what swap.js is all about, I think, is handling the whole, like, jamming that intermediary in the way. Let's read some documentation. Swap page content from an existing tab into a new browser within a container page. Page state is preserved by using swap frame loaders, just like when you move a tab to a new window. This provides a seamless transition for the user since the page is not reloaded. Oh, yeah, good. There's some documentation. Heck yeah. Firefox docs. Source docs. We've got these docs, which are great. And hopefully we've got one for dev tools. Where are the developer tools? Responsive. Is there something here? Responsive. RDM. Design mode. It's not in there. Interesting. Where is responsive design mode? Here it is. Well, for some reason it's let's just read the markdown in here. You have a single browser tab that has visited several pages and now has a history that looks like this. That looks like, in oldest to newest order, so the browser had been at NewsBlur, then it went to Mozilla.org, and then it went to Convolves, and then it went back to Mozilla.org. So we've got some forward and back history. When opening responsive design mode, the browser tab's history must be preserved. Additionally, we strive to preserve the exact state of the currently displayed page. It seems a bit convoluted, but one advantage, effectively any in-page state, which is important for single-page apps where data can be lost if they are reloaded. This seems a bit convoluted, but one advantage for this technique is that it preserves tab state since the same tab is reused. This helps to maintain any extra state that may be set on tab by add-ons or others. So here's how it works. You create a temporary hidden tab to load the tool UI. You mark the tool tab browser's doc shell as active, so the viewport frame is created eagerly and be ready to swap. You create the initial viewport inside the tool UI. You swap the tab content from the regular browser tab to the browser within the viewport using swap browser doc shells. Okay, you force the original browser tab to be non-remote. Since the tool UI must be loaded in the parent process, we're about to swap the tool UI into this tab. Swap the tool UI into the original browser tab and close the temporary tab used to load the tool via swap browsers and close others. Start a tunnel from the tool tab's browser to the viewport browser so that the same browser UI functions like navigation are connected to the content of the viewport instead of the tool page. Holy smokes. Holy smokes, that's complicated. To close RDM, we do all this stuff. So we somehow, I think we need to train the code that does the swapping to deal with process flips. So let's open up swap.js again and look at the code. So what is swap.js and when does it get loaded? Swap.js. Who loads swap.js? I don't see it actually used by anyone. DevTools modules. Oh no. I suspect maybe there's some clever packaging going on here. Swap to inner browser, though, is called by what? Manager. Swap to inner browser. So this is, I think, the main entry point. There's a require getter. Swap to inner browser. We get that from swap. Anything else? No. Okay, so swap to inner browser is like the main entry point. And I think the thing that we need to examine. So it takes a tab, so a browser tab, the content to be swapped, a URL to the page that holds an inner browser, a URL to a page that holds an inner browser. Oh, no, I don't know what that means. And get inner browser, a function that returns a promise to the inner browser within the container page. Don't really know what that means, but let's start walking through. So we look at we get basically the window that's hosting the tab, and then we get the G browser. Each time the viewport content is swapped from one browser to another. DevTools server code uses to follow the content if there is an active DevTools connection. While browser.xml does dispatch some swap DocShells event, this one is easy for DevTools to follow because it's only emitted once per transition instead of twice. Okay. So we have this like custom function here to send this browser swap event. A version of browser add tab that absorbs the tab open event. The swap process uses a temporary tab and there's no real need for others to hear about it. So that way that web extensions don't hear about it. Okay, so that's a little hacky, but all right. So we add a web tab and we pass in the URI and whatever options there are. We say that the triggering principle. Okay. And then a version of swap browse and close others that absorbs the tab close event. So similar to this one, except it's for closing. It is possible for the frame loader swap within swap DocShells to fail when various frame state is either not ready yet or doesn't match between the two browsers trying to swap. However, such errors are currently caught and silenced in the browser because they're apparently executed in certain cases. Expected in certain cases. So here we do our own check to verify that the swap actually did in fact take place, making it much easier to track such errors when they happen. Okay. Try to unwind to save tab content from being lost. If we get the original tab ID and then we swap and then we make sure that the other now is the original we make sure that the we make sure that if the tab IDs weren't updated, then we throw an error. Okay. Wait for a browser load into a new frame loader. Okay, we load a URI and we pass in the options, and then we wait browser. We wait for the Zool frame loader created event. Okay, return a promise. Okay, and then so swap to inner browser is going to return this thing. It's going to return an object that has a function start on it and a function stop on it. And that's it. And then there's like some other stuff in here. Freeze navigation state. Browse navigation properties will freeze temporarily to avoid blinking in the location bar. Freeze navigation state. Thaw navigation state. Browser elements that are passed to swap browse DocShells are expected to have certain properties that exist only on Zool browser elements. Rather than duplicate the swapping code used by the browser to work around this, we stub out the missing properties needed for the swap to complete. So some stubbing out and faking out. So this start thing is where we start seeing the code that Jay Ryans is talking about. SmurfD's like kind of a tongue twister in that markdown document, but RDM is used for what? Kind of like a live preview page thingy? Responsive design mode is used to simulate what the page will look like on devices with smaller screens. So for example, we can simulate an iPhone 6. This is what it would look like. These are the dimensions of an iPhone 6. And we can like also try and... That's a bad bug here with the pop-up. We can simulate like bad network, and we can change the user agent if we want, and then we can use touch simulation. So my clicking is simulating touch simulation now. So if I disable that, then I'm using click events, but I turn on this, I get touch simulation. And then I can take a screenshot of the viewport, and what does this do? Some options in there, but that's what responsive design mode is all about. And I can like rotate. This looks a little busted. Oh man, responsive design mode, a little, or I should say Search Fox might be a little busted here in responsive design mode, at least in the and those dimensions. Yeah, other websites, like, let's try, what would be a really responsive site? I'm going to guess something like Facebook would be pretty responsive. So let's go into responsive design mode and see what that looks like. Let's ask for an iPad's view of things. That's actually not as responsive as I would have expected. That's really surprising, actually. Let's try a different website, one that might be a little more responsive. Google. Oh, Google. Responsive design mode. Okay, that's a little. I watched it adjust there. Let's see what it looks like on an iPhone. So, see, notice how the page kind of like adjusts as the dimensions of the page get bigger. It flexes a little bit, and then if I get real small, well, I think it's paying more attention to the user agent than the dimensions. So if I choose iPhone 6 and change the user agent, then I get this. Very interesting. Grr. Sorry for the sound. Okay, so Smurfy is like, okay, so I think that Smurfy is like, he's like, oh, I get it. Where was I? We were looking at swap.js, and I don't remember where that is. I think I must have gone away for some reason. I must have browsed away. So let's look at this start function. So the very first thing that we do is we test to see whether or not the current tab's browser will cause a frame loader switch. Like we'll do a content process swap or a content process flip if we were to, say, attempt to load example.com. And if we do, if we're going to get a new frame loader, then we load about blank. We load URI with a new frame loader. And we say load flags bypass history, load about blank. I think that's what we do. And then if we also, if we find out that we needed a new frame loader, we'll do this. If it turns out we have to change the process, then we're going to update the browser remoteness. We're actually going to swap out the original about blank and load, open up a new browser. We're going to do the process swap effectively. So why was this stuff originally added? That was added by for the case of about new tab swapping, and in this case we avoid process reselection inside RDM. What does this mean? 7 months ago. Navigating away from new tab triggers the various blocks on remote flip. Unfortunately, RDM is prepared for content to flip around once it's already open. 1. Block opening RDM for preloaded browsers. This would be simple to do, but somewhat user hostile. There appears to be a portion of the user base that likes to start from a new tab, open various dev tools, then navigate to the page of interest. 2. Make RDM fully aware of remoteness flipping. We could attempt to make RDM handle this remoteness flipping situation somehow. I'm quite wary of this option as there's already quite a bit of complexity around remoteness flipping for normal browsing and also in RDM by itself. Pursuing this path likely means both RDM and remoteness flipping would grow even more tentacles of mystery and confusion. Once RDM is open for a tab, stop trying to flip remoteness. RDM already requires tabs to be running in the content process. It won't allow opening for parent process content like about preferences. We could decide to tweak the several blocks that want to rerun process selection for a preloaded browser to avoid that behavior when RDM is loaded in the tab. So like what happens if we are in about preferences and we try to load responsive design mode? Only available for remote browser tabs. There's those for web content and multi-process Firefox. Okay. And I say if a user inits RD endpoint in a new tab, can we first start by browsing the tab to about blank instead? So it was my idea. We explicitly handle about a new tab. Is there a canonical way ask the parent process? Good thinking. Okay, so I am at least partially responsible for this. Once again, I am holding the smoking gun. Were tests added for this? No. So I think we actually are going to have to do the thing that Jay Ryans was a little wary of, which was to add remoteness flipping support. That's the thing to do. So let's start by tearing out this stuff. Wait a second. That's not the code I remember. Where are we? Did I back something out? I think I did. I think I backed out. Right, I already backed out the stuff that Jay added. So I'm gonna remove this as well. Since I think, wait, all he added was that check at the beginning and this function load URI with new frame loader. Okay. So now we're effectively where we started before we added like that about blank technique. So let's see what the behavior currently is whenever we do a process swap. So I believe this should cause a process swap right now. Whenever I click on, say, let's go to mozilla.org. Right, so what happens is responsive design mode goes away. Okay. That probably happens because why? We flush, prevent the container URL, we load the URI. So we do all of that work properly. And then when we update the browser remoteness, so the page navigates and we say redirect load. I think that's how it works. Redirect load. And then we say, yeah, load another process. That has us do navigate and restore. So session store. What it does is it flushes state. So we get the most up-to-date session state from the thing that we're about to swap out. And then we ask for a new frame loader for that tab, restore tab. Update the cache. When do we update the browser remoteness? Restore tab content. When we restore the tab content, and we only do that in here, restore the tab content. Options remote time is not equal undefined, then we'll say tab browser update browser remoteness. So we'll ask tab browser to update the browser's remoteness. And then all this work is done to pull it from the DOM and reattach it to the DOM and update it and all of these things. So when we do this swap, how are we interposing this thing, this container tab? Let's look at how that works. We say that the tab, we say you're in responsive design mode. That might end up being handy for special casing this. Hide things. Hidden tab to load the tool UI. Container browser, link browser will flush it, even though we load the container with fallback path for tabs, no history, which fabricates a history entry for reading. Avoids send bogus epoch value to our container tab. Oh, so much hacking. Okay, and then we load the container URL, and that's what I think was passed here. So let's see what, whenever someone calls this, what do they pass generally as the container URL? Whoops. Oops. I think I can shut that down now. Container URL is the tool URL. The tool URL is this. This is the page that actually contains the UI for responsive design mode. Okay, I understand. We load that in this other hidden background tab, and then we clone the state flags over. Okay. Mark the tool tab browser's doc shell is active so the viewport frame is created eagerly and we will be ready to swap. Okay. Create the initial viewport inside the tool UI. Calling up. So we wait for the tab to be loaded. We get the inner browser for it. Get inner browser. How does that work? Container browser, content window, add. Add initial viewport. Browser mounted. So the viewport browser is what's actually loading gonna load the content. We decorate it up. And then we dispatch DevTools browser swap. And then we actually do the swap between a tab and the inner browser. Force the original browser tab to be non-remote since the tool UI must be loaded in the parent process. We're about to swap the tool UI into this tab. Swap the tool UI, viewport showing the content into the original browser tab. Okay. Start a tunnel from the tool tab's browser to the viewport browser so that the same browser UI functions like navigation are connected to the content. The viewport instead of the tool page will start the tunnel. Force the browser UI to match the new state of the tab and browser, and then show the UI, show the browser. Yeah, now the move is done. So that's all quite complex. Now, how would this deal with a remoteness flip? Well, update browser remoteness is going to attempt to swap the top level browser instead of the inner browser. So that's no good. And then is the inner browser, I would assume there's a thing, there's like a reference. Add initial viewport. Let's see how that works. Bootstrap, add viewport. I wonder if that's called every time. If so, that's good. Because that means that if we were to swap out that iframe.browser, this will point to the right thing. So we're not caching the value, that's good. Store. Oh. Some kind of React thing. Redux. Responsive.html index. Where is the iframe? Components, viewports. Sizable viewport. DOM. Aha. Just reading here on how all this stuff is first rendered. Right, so that's a problem. The remote type of the initial iframe, so a couple problems. The iframe that's initially inserted into the DOM for the tool UI is currently hard-coded, has a web content process type of web. So that's a problem. Make it possible so that the initial iframe will have a matching remote type to the tab we're about to view in RDM, because I believe currently G browser selected browser, our remote type is privileged, right? So we want to make sure that what we're going to swap to, that it's going to be the same remoteness type. So that's the first thing. So that way we open responsive design mode in something like about new tab. Well, that's weird because like if I did that right now, actually, so I got rid of all of that code that tries to load about blank. Now I'm going to turn on the privileged separate content process. That's there. So it's strange to me that this is loading properly. Is it loading properly? I guess is my next question. Let's take a look at the UI here. Wow, it's really catching up. All right. Here you go, iframe. Remote type is privileged. So the remote type actually does get copied over. That's very interesting. I don't know how that happened. Aha. Force the original browser tab to there be remote since web content. So tab, content browser. Force the original browser tab to be remote since web content is loaded in the child process. We're about to swap the content into this tab. So we asked for the linked browser, the tab that oh, that's if when we close it. Here we say Zool browser, and when we add the Zool browser decorations, return this attribute. define property on the browser, remote type, return get attribute, remote type. How is that remote type getting set? Let's take a look inside responsive.html. We're going to look at remote type. Aha, when we set up the tunnel. We're tunneling to an inner browser with a specific remoteness, so it's simpler for the logic of the browser UI to assume this tab is taken on that remoteness, even though it's not true, since the actions the browser UI performs by setting this attribute and then forcibly reinitializing the binding state. We start using the remote browser message manager, which you use for remaining actions. This works well here since it gives us the main thing we need to remote route in the inner browser. Oh my goodness, content within is not reloaded. What is outer? Tunnel to inner browser. Outer and inner. Tunnel. Browser, inner browser. Is the one that the iframe that we created. And what do? We tell the outer browser to have the remote types. I don't think that's what I'm talking about, though. In the case of remote type, the attribute must be set before the element is added. Don't have any effect. How is the remote type? How is the remote type of the iframe being updated? Well, it is. That's interesting. Create a temporary hidden tab. Tap silently. Right. How does that work? Well, one thing we could do is I tried using the debugger on this and it was really hard. But one thing we could do is we could start by examining the container or the inner browser remote type. Let's see if by that point we've got ourselves our privileged remote type. So it's null to begin with. No remote type. How about get attribute remote type? And then I'll do one at the very end as well. At end. Okay. Remote type at end is web. So it starts at web and ends at web. And now let's go to responsive manager. So swap to inner browser. Then over here, do we have a reference to the inner? How do we get the inner browser? Tunnel. Tunnel starts here, so the tunnel. Inner remote type at the end is web, and yet whenever I look at the remote type with the browser toolbox, it's going to be privileged. How did that happen? Yeah, remote type. Oh! Oh my goodness. What's going on here? What's going on here? One is remote type web with a lowercase t, and one is remote type capital T. That seems weird and problematic and probably a bug, and that seems like an oversight. So first of all, let's go back to basics. What's it supposed to be? Well, I believe it's supposed to be remote capital T type. Yeah, capital T. So when is the remote capital T type set, and how come, like, I guess we don't need the lowercase t one then, and we could remove it, or is there a bug here? Are we missing something? But that's interesting. Let me write that down. We seem to have a bug where RDM is setting the inner iframes attribute remote type, but it should be remote type with a capital T. Is that initial remote type setting even needed? All right, let's find out. Remote type eventually ends up as privileged. Okay, that's good. That's good. So it's somewhere in here, but I don't know where. I'm gonna guess it's probably when we tunnel. Just before we tunnel. So I'm gonna say debug inner remote type, debug tunnel, and tunnel started. And I'm gonna turn on debugging. All right. This proxying and swapping, it's crazy. It's crazy. But I'd be like, I can't think of a better solution for what they should have done off the top of my head. So I don't blame them. Okay, here we go. Add blank tool tab, blah, 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 blah. Wait until inner start. Inner browser to remote type is privileged. Tunnel started. So it was privileged even before. It's privileged sooner. I'm gonna do it here, and then here, and then here, and then here, and then here, and here. Try that. See where it happens. I want to fully understand this. And then I think I'm going to stop the stream in about 5 to 10 minutes once I understand this. Because I have to prepare for a meeting. Okay. Load available. Originally it's null. Add decorations, that's null. Then they swap content to inner browser, then it's privileged. Swap content, so when we do the swap browser doc shells thing, that's when those properties go over. So let's take a look at swap browser doc shells. It uses this, and that's on tab browser. So tab browser maybe is responsible for updating the type. Swap doc shells. Fields to swap. We just swap everything. Fields to swap. Huh. Change the remote type. That would occur inside update browser remoteness if we passed a remote type. Okay, so tab remote type AR tab dot linked browser get attribute remote type other browser remote type a other browser dot get attribute remote type. Okay, now we're just gonna put that here. I say 1 and then 2 and then how about 3 and then 4. I think it's going to be here. That's my guess. And then 5 and then 6. Just trying to understand, just trying to using some printf debugging to understand what is going on. There's a sound clip of someone going like, "What is happening?" From, I'm not entirely sure. I think it might be the Crucible, and I should probably add that to my soundboard. Okay. Other browser mode types null, other browser mode types null, and then after 4, then yeah, so it was here whenever we did this. We dispatched an event, swap doc shells. So I can get rid of all of that stuff inside of here. Don't need those anymore. All that writing can go away. Just delete it. And then inside browser.xml, we're going to add something similar. We're going to say our remote type is like get attribute remote type other remote type a other browser dot get attribute remote type, and we'll just put some numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's get our answer. Where is it happening? Maybe it's inside this swap frame loaders thing. This dot swap frame loaders. Wonder if in our native layer, swap frame loaders. Remote type. Aha! Swap the remote type property as the frame loaders are being swapped. That's what's going on. That is what is going on. So in our native layer, when we swap the frame loaders, so I don't actually need to run this test now. So but it should be remote type with capital T. Is that initial remote type setting even needed? Probably. Actually, no. When the frame loaders are swapped, the remote type will be applied to the new inner browser here. And so I will make reference to code. Where was it? Remote type. Yeah. So I have a to-do here. Get rid of the unnecessary and erroneous remote type attribute on the browser.js React component definition. That's this thing. Components right here. We don't need this. That is useless and confusing. That's the first thing. So now that we know that this thing, it will swap correctly, two remotes will swap, then what we need to do is let's do a quick experiment in the last couple minutes remaining. Is there a way that we can ask responsive design mode for things like the inner browser, or is that all contained? Responsive UI manager. Tabs toggle, open if needed, close if needed, record telemetry closes, active for tabs, get responsive UI for tab. Window. Get viewport browser. That's what we want. Get viewport browser. Get viewport browser. So I'm going to do a quick check here. First of all, in here, do I have access to a global called responsive UI? No. How do I get access to the responsive UI global? UI. Responsive UI manager, UI manager. How do I get that? Outside of, oh, do I have to do this? DevTools like thing. Get viewport browser. Viewport browser. Is there anywhere outside of testing and responsive code? Not really. Well, I don't think I'm gonna have time to sort this out, but like, can we have update browser remoteness? Can we have it ask the browser element for the right browser to flip remoteness for? Or something? Okay. And then flip that remoteness. Would RDM like that? We'll see. Make it possible the initial frame will have a matching remote type. We actually don't need to do that because whenever we do the frame loader swap, I can actually just strike through that. Format, strike through. So we're making a little bit of headway here, but yeah, light bulb where you found the remote type was set. Yeah, I do feel like I probably should have had like a little light bulb sound, or here I have a Zelda sound that might be appropriate, like I've learned a thing. All right, I'm going to call it here. Thank you so much for watching episode 157 of The Joy of Coding. I hope that was somewhat interesting. Yeah, let me know what you thought. There is a form here to let me know what you thought of the episode. I read everything that comes in, and I want to hear from you. So, yeah, that's it. I believe I should see you next week. I will be streaming next week. I should be as usual. And, yeah, that's it. Take care. Bye-bye.
The joy of God.